Hi, Helen. Let's take a look at your new set of essays. Online communication, more popular than face-to-face meetings. Let's see what you wrote. In today's modern society, many choose internet connections rather than face-to-face meetings at work. This should be than with an A. This essay will explore some benefits as well as some drawbacks using examples from personal knowledge to demonstrate points and prove arguments. Okay, now I think we've talked about this before. There is a very direct question here in this task, and they're asking you if the advantages of this trend outweigh the disadvantages of this trend. You have not answered it anywhere. All you've done is you've said that you're going to talk about the benefits and the drawbacks, but you haven't actually answered the question, so we don't know what your position is. Remember that if you want a 7, one of the things that you need to do is you need to make sure that your position is clear throughout the response. Throughout means from the beginning to the end, okay? So one of the easiest ways to ensure that you've done this is to include your position in the introduction, okay? So let's continue. Work meetings through online connections have, or actually clearly have, because it's this, meetings, clearly have one advantage. And then here I would have put a colon, okay, and then convenience without the. This is largely because it is possible to have meetings wherever is totally spelled differently. You are. For example, companies that have offices located in different cities or countries are now available to join an online meeting. How about therefore, there is no need for long and exhausting travel, singular, before entering a meeting. You can't do this. You see, even Word doesn't like it. In contrast, a disadvantage would be the access of internet connections. This is common in remote areas, not the, get rid of the, where the internet wiring structure is not fully covered and developed. Therefore, cyber communication has some pros and cons. All right, I had to clean up the grammar. Okay, so what are you doing here? You're talking about the positives and the negatives of online communication. All right, let's continue to see what else you wrote in the next paragraph. We'll talk more about it in a little bit. Oops, hold on. Another more traditional way of having job meetings here is face-to-face. On one hand, I don't know what this means. I think you mean through. Through physical meetings, one can understand each other better through gesture and facial expressions. For instance, if somebody agreed by just raising, you spell it right, an eyebrow, or I don't know what a waggly nod is, I have no idea. It would be difficult to reflect through the cyber world. Meanwhile, up front, careful, you mean up front, it would be impossible to miss. All right, some of this language is not completely accurate, apart from the stuff that I've already mentioned. I know what you're trying to say, but it needs to be a little more fluent. So why don't we try something like, for instance, if someone raised an eyebrow to agree, it would be difficult to catch this through online communication, yet in person, it would be impossible to miss. On the other hand, it is extremely expensive. Okay, what is it now? You have to be careful here because you had so many nouns in the last few sentences. I have no idea what this it refers to. So what you really want to say is, first of all, it's on the other hand, but then you want to say, in-person meetings are extremely expensive. For example, the cost of renting offices and meeting locations. No, the cost is very high and they are centered for meetings in person. Therefore, both the understanding of the meeting and the costs are taken into consideration. Okay. In conclusion, from examples and arguments S given, there are clearly some benefits and drawbacks S. What? Oh, from examples and arguments given, There are clearly some benefits and drawbacks, yet I firmly believe that face-to-face meetings are preferable. It is predicted that the internet will grow stronger and better internet assessment will be provided. You don't mean assessment, I think you mean connection. All right, so let's talk about this. Obviously, I corrected some grammar, I corrected some vocabulary. You saw that. I want to talk to you a little bit about task achievement. So we already talked about how important it is to write your position in the introduction. What I want to talk about is actually how you answered the question, though. What question are they asking you? Do you understand what the question is? The question, and happens to a lot of people. A lot of people assume the question is discuss the advantages of online communication, discuss the advantages of face-to-face meetings. It's actually not what this essay is about. The essay has a given, all right? So it's making a very solid assumption here. And the assumption that it is making is that we use all of these online methods more than we do meeting our colleagues in person. Okay? So it's this shift. The essay is not asking you about like each one in a bubble, online communication versus face-to-face communication. It's asking you something else. It's saying this shift we have towards all digital communication, does this shift have more advantages or does it have disadvantages? Okay, so that's what you're supposed to be talking about. Should you mention face-to-face meetings? Yes, absolutely. So when you're analyzing online communication, and that's what you should be focusing on more, this shift, the fact that maybe in like a lot of jobs, you know what? Maybe in some jobs it's like 80-20. All right, like 80% online and then 20% in person. In other jobs, maybe it's like 65-35. But the fact that we have this shift, this kind of um, trend to go away from face-to-face meetings and more towards online communication. And when I say online communication, you also have to remember it doesn't just mean Zoom, Skype, Google Meet, whatever. It also means email. It also means text. Okay, so these are also forms of online communication. And the fact that we've moved so much in this direction, are there positives to this or are there negatives? That's what this essay is about. Okay? So, what this really should be is the how can I say this? What you could have done here, which would have been nice, is if you had made a comparison to online and how the advantages that you get from, did I say online? In person, I meant. So you could have talked about how, where was it? Okay, yeah, here you kind of did it. There's no need for long and exhausting travels. That's fine. Um, you didn't want to write this. This was wrong for me. Okay, at least not in this paragraph. Okay, here you could have talked about more advantages. You could have said there's a record when you have online communication. There is a record of all communication that has gone on. So there isn't like, oh, I forgot, or oh, there was a misunderstanding. No, because there's a written record of everything, and this really aids in efficiency. Also, it's a time saver because everybody knows that meetings tend to waste a lot of time, not just getting there but also the meetings themselves. A lot of these emails, there's like a lot of memes out there that says this could have been an email. So these are some of the benefits. So these are some things you could have talked about here about how this shift is really great. It's wonderful. And then here you could have talked about the disadvantages of all of this online communication. Okay, so we feel more isolated at work. We have fewer connections with our colleagues at work. You're losing some of the nuance of communication, like you said, with like the raising of the eyebrows. So these are the things you want to talk about in this paragraph here. But again, it's this shift. Okay, it's not like, oh, this is good, this is bad, but it's telling you, hey, we're doing a lot of communication online. Are there more advantages to this or disadvantages? That's what this is about. All right, let me see your questions here. Should I have divided the paragraph one for, no, I already told you about that. I didn't think you should have done this at all. You should have done what I just suggested. The advantages of this shift towards online communication in one paragraph, and then the disadvantages of this shift. What are we losing? What are the problems, etc. in the second body paragraph. Okay. I'm really trying to find a structure to get me going. I find it so difficult and stuck after the first main idea. Since my idea is off my example. You don't need necessarily to have 4 ideas, not necessarily 2 and 2. You could have just had 1 per paragraph and just really extended them and really developed them, and that would have been fine. Okay, and then go to my previous text. I have rewritten, and I'm wondering if it is okay to skip the disagree part in paragraph 2 and divide. Oh goodness, I don't remember. Oh yeah, okay. Let's see. The disagree part in individual family. Yeah, I think you could have. Yeah, you didn't need to talk about. I don't think that one requires you to talk about both sides. I think it's a to what extent you agree or disagree one. So you certainly could have talked about individual and family in one, and then society in another. And in doing that, you could have done negative effects and then positive effects. So, for example, you could have talked about the negative effects on the family and on society. Okay, so this loss of food culture that affects society. You could have talked about like family bonds breaking down because people aren't cooking and eating together, and this is a really wonderful activity for families. But then you could have talked about for individuals, geez, isn't this wonderful? Because, if you're somebody who lives on your own, or if you're somebody who is in the city and you work and you don't have time to cook at home or what have you, these provide really satisfying meals that can be obtained quickly and very cheaply. So on an individual level, they can actually be very beneficial. So that's some stuff you could have done there. All right, let's move on. What else have I got? I should have a task one for you somewhere yonder. There it is. German school subjects. Okay, so it's very tiny. Why is this so tiny? Hold on. Yikes, 120 words. So this would not do well just because of the fact that it's so short. You wouldn't get marked down, like you wouldn't get penalized a band score, but because it's so short, it's not going to do well in task achievement. I can tell you that right now. So keep that in mind. It used to be that you would score poorly in task achievement, and then on top of that, we would lower the score 1 band in task achievement, but that was like a double penalization, and so I stopped that. And now, if it's so short, you just get penalized in task achievement, and that's done. This is really way too short at 120 words. Now, I know that these are difficult. IELTS doesn't really give these to you a lot, but they do come up every now and then where you have to really extend your answer. And, you have a small diagram and you have to really extend it to make it, kind of full. So yeah, a lot of students find these tricky, but there are some tricks to it. So let's get into it right now, okay? All right. The pie chart illustrates the trendiest courses to be attended in Germany in 2017. All right, well, careful here. Not trendiest. Popular and trendy is not really an accurate synonym here. So watch out for that. And then I didn't like to be attended because it gives you this impression like that it's future, but it's not. It's in 2017. So let's try it differently. The pie chart illustrates the most popular courses among students in Germany in 2017. That's it. Overall, PE was the most popular subject of the 7 to be chosen from. All right, that's okay. Whereas IT was the least. Good. 4 out of the 7 courses stood at almost 80% of the total amount of first hand, or not first hand, but first choice. I don't like this sentence. I don't want to hear because you're really getting into detail. It is no longer an overview when you start putting in figures like this 80%, that doesn't belong here. That should belong in your next paragraph. What you wrote here was plenty for an overview. Okay, So regarding the areas that not were in favor for most students, there's some awkwardness there. How about regarding the areas that were most favored by students, there were three subjects. The highest, not number, you have to be careful here. We're talking percentages. So that would have been a good word. The highest percentages appearing in PE, or the highest figure. Figure is a great word. You can throw it anywhere, okay? So the highest figure appearing in PE with 22.9, followed by history and maths 22.4 and 19.5 respectively. You see here, look at this. You've got three, you only have 7 categories, and you've just finished with 3 of them in one sentence. That's why you couldn't get above 120 words. Meanwhile, in as many as 18.1 considered physics as the best choice, whereas biology and geography only got chosen by around 7% each. The least favorite, careful, was IT, with the lowest percentage at 3.7. Okay, so there's really no surprise that it was only 120 words, because you really did not extend. When you have a task like this, the idea is to extend, really stretch things out. So let me tell you about how you could have done that. So, right. So when you get here, you could have said, regarding the subjects that were the most popular, 2 accounted for nearly 50% of preferences among students. Okay, specifically history, no, not history, sorry, specifically PE was recorded at 22.9%, full stop. Then history, the second most popular, had a figure of 0.5% less. Okay, then the next 2 most popular subjects were just below 20% each. In more detail, maths was the 3rd most popular subject at 19.5%, while physics rounded out the top 4 at 18.1%. Together, these 4 subjects made up roughly 80% of the total preference. Okay, so that's how I would do this. And then I would do something probably kind of similar for the last 3. I would say something like the least popular subject among students was IT at 3.7%. The next most popular subject, geography, was nearly twice as high. With biology, the last, yeah, I guess the 3rd least popular at 7.1. And then you're done. Didn't count my words, obviously. I mean, I'm just speaking them, but that should be somewhere around 150, if not more. All right, that's why I'd like to see you do this. Thanks for sending these in. I'll be waiting for more. Good luck. And yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing your next set.